Hi, it's Katrina. Did you know that drinking blood red goo from an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus is in high demand? Me neither. Today I'm going to tell you about some very weird and creepy discoveries, so hope you're ready. Who wants coffin stew? Let's start with a giant sarcophagus, ancient secrets, a sewage cocktail, and some seriously strange people. A shocking discovery in Alexandria led to an archaeological debacle. In July 2018, a construction project in Alexandria revealed an infamous black granite sarcophagus. It was found buried 16 feet underground and weighed in at a whopping 30 tons. That's roughly the weight of 6 elephants, or 500,000 tacos, for those of you measuring in snack sizes. Naturally, archaeologists were thrilled, if not a little bit grossed out. Every mummy movie ever has warned us about opening sealed tombs, especially ones as creepy as this. Not to worry, archaeologists put their fears aside and cracked the coffin wide open. It was a big reveal with a big smell. You know that feeling when you crack open an old container of leftovers and the smell makes you reconsider your life choices? Now imagine that, but on an ancient Egyptian level. Instead of barbecue sauce, human fluids were the marinade of choice here. There were 3 skeletons swimming in a stomach-churning pool of red-tinted sewage water that had seeped in over the centuries. I know what you're thinking. That sounds like the worst soup ever. It certainly does. But the internet, being its usual chaotic self, quickly responded with an online petition demanding that people be allowed to drink the so-called cursed liquid. The only motive I can think of is that people presumably wanted to absorb its powers. Sorry everyone, but there were no powers to be ingested. It was literally just sewage that had leaked into the coffin, mixed with some soggy corpse juice. Bon appetit! Putting aside the gross liquid, the huge sarcophagus was still a major mystery. Initial guesses suggested the skeletons in the coffin belonged to male soldiers, but further analysis showed the remains belonged to a young woman in her early 20s, a man in his late 30s, and another man in his early 40s. And get this, one of the skeletons had a hole drilled into their skull as part of an ancient surgical procedure called trepanation. Someone in ancient Alexandria had elective skull surgery, possibly to cure a headache, maybe to release evil spirits. Who needs an exorcism when you can just get a hole punched in your head? The coffin dates to about 323 BC, lining up perfectly with the death of Alexander the Great. Evidence even points to the people in the sarcophagus having been part of Alexander's army. Archaeologists found small gold plates engraved with military symbols, suggesting that at least the 2 men had been soldiers. Researchers are still running DNA tests to determine whether they were related. Nothing says family bonding like being buried together in a sarcophagus full of mystery juice. Would you take a sip? A werewolf in a box. This might be the weirdest discovery of the decade. Traki Dragunov, a perfectly regular Bulgarian-born farmer, was plowing his field, minding his own business, when his plow hit something hard. He dug up the mysterious hard object, finding a mystery box. A mystery box chained shut as if someone had Dracula's beating heart locked inside, or Jumanji. What do you even do in this situation? Would you put the cursed box back in the ground or bust out the chain cutters? Dragunov channeled his inner adventurer and pried open the unholy box. I, for one, am also a sucker for a mystery box, so I would have done the same thing. Inside was the unimaginable. He was staring into the hollow eye sockets of what looked very much like a skinless werewolf head. Our farmer friend unearthed this eerie relic in Novoselo, a small village in the Republic of Macedonia. Luckily for us, historian Philip Ganev was around at the time, researching for his book on the Balkan Wars. When Dragunov showed him the skull, Ganev did what any self-respecting historian would do. He took photos and called in the heavies. In this case, the heavies were government wildlife officials. The professionals were not quite convinced of the skull's supernatural origin. Instead, they concluded the apparent werewolf head was likely the skull of a regular wolf suffering from Paget disease. Paget disease is a condition that causes bones to grow larger than normal and become deformed, making the skull of the animal appear freakish. It's a very good scientific explanation. But is it the right one? Why would someone bury the deformed skull of a sick wolf in a chained box? If you know anything about Balkan folklore, you'll know that werewolves have been a staple in scary stories for centuries. Depending on which old villager you ask, there are different ways one might become a werewolf. There's the typical way of getting bitten by a werewolf on the full moon, but some believe the werewolf affliction is genetic. Maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's werewolf DNA. Another way of becoming a wolf of the night is by simply being a bad person. One legend is that if you die in sin, or if you make a deal with the devil on your deathbed, you will definitely come back howling at the moon. The real fun begins when it's time to get rid of one such monster. Historically, Balkan werewolves were not simply left to their own devices. No, sir, these creatures got the full horror movie treatment. They were removed either through exorcism, decapitation, or a good old-fashioned bonfire. It kind of sucked to be a werewolf. In case you ever find yourself in a prickly situation with a killer werewolf, you should know that Balkan legend says the best time to kill a werewolf is a Saturday. In Bulgaria, werewolves go to sleep in their graves just like vampires, but only once a week on Saturday. Let's get back to our friend Dragunov. Unlike his superstitious farming neighbors, who believed he unleashed a furry nightmare upon them by opening the box, thanks a lot Dragunov, he was thrilled about his find. He proudly shows off the skull to anyone who is interested in it. But the mystery still isn't solved. Who put the skull in the box and then buried it? Dragunov's neighbors are convinced that he will turn into a werewolf himself. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Frankenstein's secret mummy. Do I have something in store for you? 3 heads stitched onto 2 bodies, all of them human. This might be the strangest grave ever found in Central America, and it's darker than you can possibly imagine. Archaeologists were digging up dirt in the middle of Nicaragua, listening to the symphony of tropical birds and bugs, when suddenly they uncovered a burial site, one that could rewrite what scientists know about ancient head-hunting cultures. This happened at El Rayo, an archaeological site near Lake Cocibolca. The area is now part of a banana plantation, but thousands of years ago, it was home to some seriously mysterious people. These were dangerous headhunters. I don't mean headhunting as in trying to steal the competition's staff members. I mean hunting for human brains. The excavation team didn't know what they were in for when they revealed 2 bodies in the grave. The first one was stretched out on its back, legs kicked out like someone just wanted a really long nap. The second body was found face down, which is never a good sign. Normally, people are buried face down for a reason, like they were thought to be a vampire or cursed. This mysterious second body was mutilated. Its torso had been removed and it had no head. It was basically a pair of legs. Sitting nonchalantly next to the legs were 3 skulls. Each one was carefully placed in a ceramic bowl, just like you might put some oranges in a fruit bowl. Archaeologist Geoffrey McCafferty called it one of the most complex burials ever found in Nicaragua. 1 skull in a pot is surprisingly not that uncommon, but 3 in one burial is considered wild. Don't you want to know where the other half of the dead person's body is and why they had so many skulls buried with them? It's like someone tried to make Frankenstein's monster but gave up. Or maybe they were just really bad at puzzles. The clue is in the clay bowls or pots. Ancient Nicaraguans were known for using cacao pots to bury their dead. McCafferty thinks the 3 heads in El Rayo came from rival tribes. Headhunters may have killed some of their enemies and then collected their heads as trophies. He has seen evidence of trophy heads before, plus there are ancient texts that confirm headhunters lived in Nicaragua. Spanish chronicler Gonzalo Fernández Oviedo once wrote about decapitated heads that were resurrected. In the 1500s, Oviedo was told by indigenous groups that someone decapitated in battle could be brought back to life. They simply needed to stuff the neck with jocote leaves and bark and then sew the neck back onto the body. Ruth Martinez, an archaeologist from Nicaragua, thinks the burial could be more than just a trophy collection. She's all about rewriting the way we view these ancient people, who have often been reduced to stereotypes. Maybe the Nicaraguans weren't head-gathering savages. I'm sure there were other things going on here, but it's still pretty creepy. A pile of skulls. Stone Age people were seriously weird. What were they thinking? Why did these prehistoric Italian villagers keep a mountain of skulls in their town for centuries? Scientists are at a total loss. Not to mention, they're a little creeped out. Here's what they found. A pile of 15 human skulls in a village from 5,500 years ago. This village existed before Stonehenge and before the first Egyptian pyramid. The skulls weren't buried in a traditional cemetery, but stacked inside a building, leading researchers to believe they were used in some kind of ancestor ritual. This disturbing collection was found at Massacre Candelaro, a prehistoric Neolithic village in Puglia, Italy. Archaeologists expected to find pottery, tools, or maybe a few animal bones. Instead, they got a full-blown skull stash. Jess Thompson, an archaeologist from the University of Cambridge, said this wasn't a burial site, which makes the find even more bizarre. The skulls were found inside a building whose purpose appeared to be for nothing but holding the skulls. It was a skull repository, a skull library even. But why? What were the villagers doing with all of the heads? It's a good question. Glad you asked. Let's first rule out the obvious theories. Were the heads trophies from slaughtered enemies? There were no cut marks or signs of violence. Were they some kind of punishment? Unlikely, since the bones seemed to be carefully handled. Perhaps they were decorative skulls put on display like an art exhibit? Maybe, but there were no holes or modifications to suggest the skulls were hung up like prehistoric wall art. So what's the explanation? Researchers like Jess Thompson think the skulls belonged to ancestors who were dug up, handled, and passed around for generations. In other words, the skulls were a Neolithic version of a family heirloom. No violence, just meticulous skull handling, like they were precious china, only, skulls. The way these skulls were broken suggests they were retrieved from earlier burials, possibly as part of a long-standing tradition. However, traditions fade with time. It seems the villagers grew tired of keeping up with the family bone collection, so they retired the skulls by placing them in a building and covering them with soil. This was by no means a sinister act. While keeping a stack of skulls might seem deeply unsettling to us, for these ancient Italians, it might have been a normal part of honoring their ancestors. And hey, at least they weren't using the skulls as coffee mugs. Fido finds a dino. How's this for fun? A French dog became an unlikely paleontologist by digging up a gigantic dinosaur skeleton from 70 million years ago. AI might be coming for your job, but dogs might replace paleontologists. Dog walker Damien Boschetto was going for a leisurely stroll in the woods in 2024, expecting nothing more than fresh air, and maybe that the dog would chase a squirrel up a tree. Except this particular walk took a slight detour into the Cretaceous period. Damien just so happens to be an amateur paleontologist and part-time dinosaur detective. Damien is the kind of guy you want to go on hikes with because he can spot fossils. While exploring the forest near Montpellier, France, Damien hit the jackpot. He and his pup stumbled upon a freshly collapsed cliffside. Buried in the rubble was one of the most complete titanosaur fossils ever found. It was a near intact 100-foot-long giant that roamed the earth during the late Cretaceous period. Titanosaurs were basically land whales, huge beasts that make elephants look like Pomeranians. Titanosaurs were some of the largest creatures to ever walk the earth, long-necked, plant-munching behemoths that could grow as long as a school bus. Finding their fossils this well preserved is incredibly rare. Most dinosaur remains are fragmented or scattered, but this titanosaur's bones were still connected, from the hind skull all the way to the tail. In paleontology terms, that's like winning the lottery. The real paleontologists were called in to excavate the huge dinosaur skeleton. But their dig didn't stop at just one herbivore. The site turned out to be a bone bed, a gold mine of prehistoric remains. Alongside the titanosaur, archaeologists unearthed fossils from rabdodons, also herbivores, theropods, fearsome carnivores related to the T-Rex, and ancient crocodiles, because no prehistoric swamp would be complete without them. Right now, the titanosaur fossil is undergoing study at the Cruising Museum's laboratory, where researchers are analyzing, preserving, and preparing it for public display. Scientists estimate the fossil is between 70 and 72 million years old, dating back to the final days of the Cretaceous period, right before the dinosaurs took their final bow thanks to a certain asteroid. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Lester Dinerstein. Being a teacher is hard work. And also to Hans Pyre for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Terrible sacrifice at Teotihuacan. How many bones does it take to appease a god? The answer, uncovered at Teotihuacan in Mexico, is a chilling testament to the brutal realities of faith. 2,000 years ago, a slaughter took place, and the earth still screams with the echoes of sacrifice. Teotihuacan was one of the OG megacities of the ancient world. Think of it as the New York City of its time, but with way more pyramids and less honking. Probably more screaming, though. This place, just 30 miles northeast of Mexico City, was home to massive pyramids like the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. It was a bustling metropolis with a population of up to 125,000 people. They thrived in the heart of ancient Mesoamerica. Teotihuacan was a place of power, mystery, and bloody ceremonies. Nawa Sugiyama, an assistant professor of anthropology at UC Riverside, stumbled upon 4 chambers under the Pyramid of the Moon. This was one of the most important religious buildings in all of North America. Inside those 4 chambers were animal bones. The bones belonged to carefully selected and strategically sacrificed creatures. Animals like jaguars, Mexican gray wolves, golden eagles, rattlesnakes, and more. In one of the largest chambers, known as Burial 6, Nawa's team unearthed over 100 animal remains. And that wasn't all. There were also 12 human remains mixed in with the animal bones. What does this mean? According to Dr. Nawa, there is a good explanation for all the bizarre things that have been found. The Teotihuacanos saw apex predators as powerful beings that connected the earthly realm with the sky and the underworld. By sacrificing eagles and jaguars, it was as if they were tapping into these creatures' cosmic power. It all comes down to power. There is even more symbolism to unpack. Using a mix of fancy science techniques like zoo archaeology and isotopes, Nawa Sugiyama learned that these animals were fed with maize. Maize was more than a key staple in Mesoamerican diets. They also believed it was the very thing that human beings were made from. God molded Adam from the soil, but the Teotihuacanos believed their gods molded them from corn. The animals must have been part of a huge, complex ceremony, and those 12 human remains were likely a part of it too. In Burial 6 alone, Nawa discovered 18 golden eagle remains. They were symbols of the 18 months in Teotihuacan's ancient calendar. Whatever the ritual was, it had something to do with astrology and the cosmos. Even though scientists have learned a ton from these bones, much of Teotihuacan's history remains a mystery. It seems like this was a multi-ethnic society without a single ruler, and their shared religious practices might have been the secret sauce that held everything together. All hail the holy foreskin. Let me tell you about one of the strangest and most bizarre stories from the Middle Ages. It's all about the divine foreskin, Jesus Christ's very own holy relic. James White, a PhD student from the University of Alberta, has made it his mission to study this medieval obsession with the holy foreskin. His thesis, Ring of Flesh, the late medieval devotion to the holy foreskin, will have you questioning what was wrong with people back then. Let me start at the beginning with the New Testament. The Bible mentions that Jesus, as a Jewish boy, was circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. You can turn to Luke 2:21 to read it for yourself. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, some clever relic hunters saw a huge opportunity to claim that they had the real foreskin of Jesus. A piece of Christ's flesh was bound to get the crowds and the donations rolling in. You might already know that Catholics and random body parts go together like syrup and waffles. For centuries, be it a finger, an arm, or a toenail, Christians believed that saintly relics channeled divine power. These sacred objects were thought to be incorruptible, and what's more potent than a piece of the body of Christ? If a finger or a toe could work miracles, imagine what something like the Messiah's foreskin could do. By the 9th century, the first whispers of the holy foreskin started circulating. Then, by the 12th century, several churches in Europe claimed to have it. Some places even claimed to have multiple pieces of it. The most famous of these relics was the one given to Pope Leo III by King Charlemagne around 799, which stayed safely in Rome until the city's sacking in 1527. But as with most things, the famous relic had competition. A second holy foreskin popped up in a small village just north of Rome, in Calcutta. The Pope declared it an important find and allowed the locals to hold a procession around it every year. This relic became so treasured that locals practically worshipped it. In 1983, Calcutta's holy treasure mysteriously disappeared. Some thought it was taken by the Vatican, stolen by black market dealers, or robbed by Satanists. It's been 40 years and the relic is still missing. You don't happen to have it lying around, do you? James White has been trying to understand why pieces of flesh are so important to Christians. He thinks it's all about human connection to the divine. The holy foreskin wasn't just about the physical body of Christ, it was about emphasizing the human side of Jesus. At a time when the divine was often distant and otherworldly, this relic made Jesus more real for people. To be able to see a scrap of skin that came off the child of God must have made people's faith much stronger, as opposed to if they never saw anything at all. The creepiest flooring in the world. This is so strange, I might not believe it if there weren't evidence. You never know what's hiding underneath the floorboards. Maybe skeletons, maybe lost treasure, but have you ever considered the flooring itself might be the real mystery? Archaeologists in Alkmaar, a charming city in the Netherlands, were poking around an old building set for renovation when they found something chilling. They probably expected to find some dusty old coins or shards of pottery. Instead, they unearthed something straight out of an Aztec bone tower, a floor partially made from carefully arranged bones. If this had been an Aztec discovery, the bones would have surely been human. But this was in the Netherlands, so the bones were cattle. Still not exactly your run-of-the-mill home decor. Nancy DeYoung, an archaeologist with the excavation team, couldn't have been more thrilled. She said it's always exciting to unearth something from the past. Seeing the bone floor with her own eyes was an incredible experience. Incredible, sure, but weird too, right? Why install such freaky flooring? Try cleaning that with a Swiffer. The floor is made from very specific bones, metacarpals and metatarsals. Those are the bones in the legs and feet of cows. The bones are all sawed to the same length and neatly arranged. Each bone is placed so that the cut ends are sticking up, creating a subtle pattern. Were these bone crafters also interior decorators? Archaeologists aren't even sure what building the floor was originally part of. It dates to the 15th century, long before the house that was excavated that was built in 1609. There's another layer of history here, but archaeologists haven't found it yet. There is still the lingering question of why. Why bones instead of normal tiles? Floor tiles were widely available, and affordable too. Experts think the bones might have been a filler, like when you're trying to finish a jigsaw puzzle and use a random piece because you can't find the right one. Or maybe there's a deeper, more symbolic reason behind the bone flooring. Honestly, who knows? A strange Celtic invention. Back to bones. This time, the bizarre bones belong to the Celts. Secrets of a long-lost Celtic settlement are revealing an unusual connection to the Roman Empire. Turns out, these guys weren't just hanging out in the forest, braiding their hair and fighting Romans. Let's go to the 1st century BC, a little more than 2,000 years ago. German archaeologists digging their way through the heart of southern Germany, near the Rhine River, uncovered a huge Celtic town. It's called Altenburg-Rhenau, and it's one of the biggest and most significant Celtic sites north of the Alps. Archaeologists call the settlement an oppidum, which is a fancy word for a Celtic fortified settlement. Oppidums were places where local tribes gathered and protected their turf. This particular one was a key player in the region and was over a square mile in size. That's basically a small modern city. What archaeologists found in the ruins of this place came as a big surprise. It turns out that the Celts were rubbing elbows with the Romans. Researchers dug up Roman amphorae. These are those iconic large ceramic jars that were used to transport wine, the luxury item of the time. But why is finding amphorae in a Celtic town such a big deal? It suggests that the Celts were trading with the Romans and definitely sipping on that high-class Roman vino. But wait, it gets better. The real jaw-dropper here is the discovery of a rare bone pen. Edgar Allan Poe would like to place an order from the grave for one of these creepy writing instruments. This isn't the type of pen you keep in your desk drawer. It was used for engraving wax tablets. This is huge news. No one ever thought the Celts were sitting around writing letters, never mind with bone pens. It was assumed they could only scribble strange motifs. But this pen changes everything. It proves they could at least engrave tablets with complex information. The Celts had a more sophisticated system than we might have imagined. Gunther Violent, the excavation leader, was pretty stoked about the find. He pointed out that this discovery of writing tools is a huge piece of the puzzle for understanding how the Celts interacted with the wider world. If you're writing things down, you're probably dealing with a whole lot more than just basic trade. It's a shame that until now the Celts have been painted in such poor light. Scholars often labeled them as primitive barbarians who warred against Rome. But thanks to one weird discovery, now we know how suave and sophisticated they were. As for the actual bone pen, it doesn't appear to be human. And really, is a bone pen any weirder than writing with a feather? The pharaoh's personal doctor. What do you get when you combine a doctor, a priest, a magician, and a snake goddess? A tomb belonging to a medical professional from more than 4,000 years ago. This guy was a doctor at a time when surgery was performed with stone tools. Archaeologists in Egypt broke open the tomb of a pharaoh's chief doctor. Before you ask, the answer is no. They did not find ancient prescriptions for pyramid-related back pain, nor did they uncover the world's oldest toothbrush. What archaeologists did find is pretty amazing. Within the tomb were well-preserved wall paintings that offer a rare look into the life of an ancient Egyptian physician. This doctor had more titles than your competition on LinkedIn. The discovery happened in Saqqara, a village famous for being the eternal resting place of Egyptian royalty. The excavation was led by a joint French-Swiss archaeological team. What they found is known as a mastaba tomb. It's a fancy rectangular mud brick structure with sloping sides that kind of resembles a bench. Inside, there were no mummies, not even one. There weren't even any medical tools. It pains me to say it, but tomb raiders got there first. Those pesky scavengers beat archaeologists to the punch again. Thankfully, the tomb raiders didn't steal the vibrant paintings and inscriptions from the walls. They tell us that the doctor wasn't just any old physician. His name was Teti Neb Fu. His titles, as per the inscriptions in his tomb, include doctor, dentist, director of medicinal plants, priest, and magician. He could entertain your kids with magic tricks and then give you a root canal. Talk about full-service healthcare. Teti Neb Fu was connected to the Egyptian goddess Serket, who happened to be a deity of snake bites. Researchers believe he was a specialist, Egypt's go-to guy for scorpion stings and snake bites. Experts aren't entirely sure which pharaohs were lucky enough to have Dr. Fu on speed dial, but one strong contender is Pepi II Neferkare. He was a king from the 6th dynasty from around 2278 BC. Fun fact, Pepi II was in charge for a very long time. Some say over 90 years. If Teti Neb Fu was his personal physician, he must have been doing something right. Do you think you could have survived a medical emergency 4,200 years ago? Let me know in the comments.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Dazu rock carvings. The Dazu area in Chongqing, China is famous for its many incredibly detailed rock carvings. Dating back from the 9th to the 13th centuries, they are known for their aesthetic quality and variety of scenes depicting everyday life for people during this time period. Incredibly, they are very well preserved with few broken areas and coloring that still remains. There are 102 cliffside sculptures and rock carvings in the county, and some of them are enormous. Some of the most mysterious are 2 statues with very strange faces. It turns out that they are mythical figures dressed as generals, clairvoyants, and clairaudience. In early 2017, Li Xiaoqiang, head researcher, confirmed that 2 6-foot-tall statues represent the abilities to send and receive psychic messages and correspondence to and from spirits. The clairvoyant statue depicts a character who can see thousands of miles away, represented with large eyes and ribbons floating from his head. Clairaudience can hear thousands of miles away. The statues, which also represent 2 mythological generals of the Jade Emperor, date back to 1147, during the Southern Song dynasty. Both are scantily clad, showing off their toned physiques, while each displays characteristics exemplifying his strongest qualities. The characters each hold an unidentified object. In the case of clairvoyance, people seem to believe that the item in question is an ancient telescope, while many theorize that clairaudience possesses either a snake or a telephone receiver that he uses to hear his far-flung audience. Researchers are hesitant to officially identify the items because they admittedly aren't sure what the objects are. While both characters have existed for quite some time, statues of them are rare, Lee told China Daily. Experts will continue studying the pair in hopes of learning more about them and their role in China's past. Lost Monastery. While excavating King's Square in the city of Gloucester, England, as part of its redevelopment, archaeologists recently discovered the location of a long-lost 13th century Carmelite friary. The team, headed by Gloucester City Council and Cotswold Archaeology, found the facility's remains amongst the wreckage of a demolished parking garage, bringing an end to an age-old mystery regarding where the White Friars had their headquarters. They were members of the Order of Carmelites, but all information of their location there had been lost. The historical record contained evidence that the establishment was somewhere in the area, but for years its exact location eluded historians and other experts. So far, experts have uncovered the remnants of at least 4 large buildings that were either made from stone or with stone footings, a medieval drain, and the remains of tiled and mortared floors. For around 300 years, White Friars played an active part in Gloucester and produced some notable friars, city archaeologist Andrew Armstrong told Express. Seeing and documenting this site will serve to underline and recognize the place of friary in the city's history. Friars were similar to monks when it came to their dedication to prayer and learning, but unlike monks, friars actively engaged with the outside world and performed community service. Among the most noteworthy members of the Order of Carmelites was Nicholas Cantelo, or Cantilupe, a historian and master of theology of noble background who lived during the 15th century. Ancient Tablet. Experts recently dated a coarse cylindrical stone artifact containing a Greek inscription all the way back to 165 BC, before Jesus was born. The object, which archaeologists discovered in March in the Duhok region of Iraq, contains Hellenistic script, connecting it to the historical period following Alexander the Great's death in 323 BC. Researchers who translated the inscription to Kurdish discovered that it mentions Demetrius, a 2nd century BC king of Macedon who ruled over the region. Many ancient artifacts of seemingly Greek origins have been discovered throughout Asia and the Middle East, but to Duhok Museum director Hassan Ahmed, who announced the fascinating find, as well as other experts, the tablet's discovery is major, not only for its historical value, but because it potentially opens up possibilities for further excavations in the Kurdistan region. Just days before Ahmed released a statement about the Hellenistic tablet, the Kurdistan Region Ministry of Municipalities and Tourism announced the discovery of multiple archaeological sites in Erbil province. Tablet linked to Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark from the Book of Genesis tells of a devout man who survived apocalyptic worldwide flooding by building a wooden boat called an ark at God's instruction. Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their sons' wives were the only humans to survive the flood, their lives spared thanks to their loyalty to God in a corrupted and evil world. When the flood was over, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Evidence of the ark is very faint, which isn't a problem for those who don't believe the story in the first place, but many do, including plenty of archaeologists, some who theorize that Ararat is a dormant volcano in Turkey. One of them is Tom Meyer, a Bible studies professor at Shasta Bible College in California. Meyer believes there are numerous clues indicating that Noah's Ark is a factual story and which could help find the vessel's remains. He explained his views in an interview with Express Media, first pointing out that there are numerous historical accounts of catastrophic flooding that at least resemble the biblical story of the flood Noah and his family endured, with the secular versions landing the ark in various places. Meyer further stated, a recent cracking of an ancient puzzle by Irving Finkel, the assistant keeper of ancient Mesopotamian languages at the British Museum, corroborates the Bible's record of the ark landing on Mount Ararat. The ancient puzzle in question is the Simmons Ark tablet, a 3,700-year-old Babylonian cuneiform tablet that describes the ancient Babylonian story of the flood. It's incredibly similar to the story of Noah's Ark, despite allegedly being about a different event. Within its 60 lines of cuneiform, Dr. Irving found text indicating where the Babylonians thought the Ark was, which he claims refers to the region of eastern Turkey where Mount Ararat is located. Religion can be a sensitive topic when it comes to archaeology, as this example proves. While some archaeologists write off Dr. Irving's claims as scientifically unsupported poppycock, others find them completely credible, despite a conspicuous lack of physical evidence. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We have lots of videos coming up. Turfan balls. A recent study describes the discovery of 3 leather balls in the prehistoric Yanghai Cemetery in northwestern China, serving as the oldest known evidence of ball games in Eurasia. The trio of artifacts were radiocarbon dated to sometime between 1189 and 911 BC, predating other known evidence of ball games by several centuries. This makes these balls about 500 years older than the previous known ancient balls and depictions of ball games in Eurasia, said study author and archaeologist Dr. Patrick Wortman. 2 of the balls were found in tombs possibly belonging to horse riders, and it is believed that the artifacts date back to a time when horseback riding first spread throughout the region. For the team, identifying the balls was only half the battle. They admittedly still haven't figured out which ball game the objects were used for, although, in their words, their use in team and goal sport is likely, hockey perhaps. But this suspicion cannot be confirmed, especially since no accessories of the same age, such as sticks, have been found. Ritual bath. During a routine excavation in anticipation of road construction in Israel's Lower Galilee region, workers and volunteers under the supervision of the Israeli Antiquities Authority, or IAA, found a 2,000-year-old mikvah, or ritual bath. In Judaism, mikvahs are used for ritualistic purification purposes. The recently discovered 57-ton bath offers new insight into Jewish life in Roman-ruled Palestine during the Second Temple period, which lasted from 597 BC to 70 AD. It was previously unknown that the residents of the ancient farmstead where the mikvah was found, or in Galilee in general, were Jewish. Additionally, as IAA archaeologists Dr. Abd El-Ghani Ibrahim and Dr. Walid Atrash pointed out, the discovery shows that the people who lived there were devoted to maintaining a traditional religious lifestyle and staying pure. It was considered that the Jews in the Roman period didn't live in farms outside the villages or towns, the experts explained. Around 1,700 years ago, a massive earthquake destroyed the farm, and 300 years later, it was abandoned for good. A crowdfunding campaign paid for the careful removal of the mikvah from the bedrock and its relocation next to a modern mikvah in Kibbutz Hanaton. Iron Age massacre. Between the 15th century BC and the 3rd century BC, the town of La Joya in what is now northern Spain was bustling. The prehistoric settlement reached a peak population of around 1,500 residents, but at some point, it ceased to exist completely. La Joya was rediscovered in 1935 and partially excavated between 1973 and 1990. During that time, archaeologists discovered the burned skeletons of at least 13 people in the streets and inside buildings. This year, a team of researchers and archaeologists performed the first detailed analysis of the human remains. Their findings, detailed in the journal Antiquity, indicate that the attackers targeted their victims when they least expected it. There were no weapons near the individuals, who the researchers believe were viciously murdered while unarmed at a public event. Moreover, the invaders did not appear to take any goods, implying that they were politically rather than economically motivated. Included among the remains are a beheaded adult male, bones containing stab marks, and a teenage girl with her arm cut off. The brutality predates the Roman conquest of the region, leading researchers to believe that the carnage may have occurred between 2 Iberian rivals. Based on the condition La Joya was left in, including the lack of proper burials, it's likely that any survivors picked up and moved elsewhere. Animals buried alive. Human and animal sacrifices were customary among certain ancient Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Inca. When they wanted to appease the gods, the Inca often sacrificed llamas, a prized asset that provided the civilization with food and clothing. So when archaeologists recently found the well-preserved remains of 5 llamas at a Peruvian site called Tambo Viejo, the discovery was exciting, but not necessarily surprising, at least not at first. But the remains are teaching experts more about the Incas' sacrificial customs. Based on radiocarbon dating, the animals were buried between 1432 and 1459, before the arrival of Spanish conquistadores. Nearby were large ovens and evidence of feasts, indicating that the sacrifices happened during celebrations. Dr. Lido Valdez from the University of Calgary explained the offerings likely were part of much larger feasts and gatherings sponsored by the state. The state befriended the local people with food and drink, cementing political alliances, whilst placing offerings allowed the Inca to claim the land as theirs. In other words, these practices were meant to appease recently conquered societies. As part of the ritual, the Inca decorated the llamas with jewelry and likely buried them alive, as evidenced by their feet being tied together, a measure that would have prevented them from moving around too much during the process. Dr. Valdez admitted that he had no way to prove that the llamas were buried alive, but he nevertheless thinks that that's what happened. Inca used to sacrifice children, and it is said some of the children were buried alive, he told the New Scientist. If they did that with children, I'm sure they would have done the same thing with llamas. 2,400-year-old mask. In September of this year, the Turkish state-run news company Anadolu Agency reported the discovery of a 2,400-year-old terracotta mask depicting the ancient Greek god Dionysus in the Acropolis of the ancient city of Deucalion. Archaeologist Kan Iren, who led the team that made the exciting find, told the press that the artifact may have been a votive mask, adding that it was likely used during winemaking rituals. According to legend, wearing a mask depicting Dionysus, the god of carnivals and masquerades, freed someone from hidden regrets and desires. Excavations at Deucalion are 32 years old, and this is the first time that we have unearthed a mask which is nearly intact, Iren said, conveying the remarkable nature of the discovery. The mask likely dates back to the end of the 4th century BC and is one of numerous intriguing artifacts that have been excavated at Deucalion, a historically multicultural city that served as an administrative center for the Persian Empire before Hellenistic influence began taking over in 334 BC. Los Sapos sweat bath. Sweat baths, also called sweat lodges, were a common part of Mesoamerican cultures, who used them for both spiritual and health-related purposes. This year, scientists working at the Xultun archaeological site in Guatemala unearthed numerous bones and tools at what's called Los Sapos sweat bath. The study, led by archaeologists from the Smithsonian Tropical Institute and Boston University, claims that the Maya viewed sweat baths as embodiments of relatives, ancestors, and supernatural beings. Dating back to sometime between 250 and 550 AD, during the early Classic period, the Los Sapos sweat bath is ornately decorated, bearing the image of a squatting female deity with legs featuring iguanas and cane toads. No other structure in Mesoamerica, sweat bath or otherwise, looks like this building, said study co-author and STRI archaeologist Ashley Sharp. It would seem that when someone enters the front of the structure, they are entering the amphibian goddess who personified the sweat bath. The team believes that the sweat bath was used for roughly 300 years before a deceased adult was buried there around 600 AD. Another 3 centuries later, the person's remains were removed and replaced with the remains of a child and various animals, including a puppy, birds, toads, and iguanas. The combination of remains was likely a dedication to the sweat bath as a place of birth and creation, and reflective of a population that was trying to ensure its survival by appeasing the goddess. Thanks for watching! If you'd like to learn more about recent archaeological discoveries or some of your favorites, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.